Alright, so we talked about clouds, now we're going to talk about fog, which kind of weird that it's a different subject because fog is just a cloud that's very near the ground. It could even be on the ground. Why do we talk about fog? Well, because it's an atmospheric hazard. Have you ever tried to Have you ever tried to drive in fog? It can be very dangerous. Now, usually cloud forms when air rises, right? You have the air, it goes up, it expands, it cools, cloud, right? This time, with fog, it's a little bit different. The air kind of stays there, but you add water to it. Or you take that air that's staying there and you cool it down. Because what happens when air cools? It can't hold as much water, and so it gets saturated and it starts to condense. Now, there's a bunch of different types of fog, and like I had said in another video, my husband's learning how to fly, and they have to study a lot of meteorology. And one of the things he's studying is the types of fog. So we'll be sitting in the living room, and all of a sudden he's like, "So what are the types of fog?" And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, seriously." So here are the types of fog. Right? Radiation fog. Radiation fog happens when the ground cools the air. What I mean by that is we learned that everything radiates, right? So the ground is radiating off its heat, and so that's cooling the ground and the air right on the ground. What happens when you cool the ground? Well, when you cool the air, you get saturation, and it starts to condense, so you get fog. This usually happens when there's not much of a wind, and it can be thickest in valleys. And so you can see this picture, right? Again, my old backyard, but the nice thick fog there with radiation. Now another type is advection fog. We talked about advection when we talked about convection. I said advection is basically convection except it goes sideways. And this is it, okay? Fog caused by warm, moist air blowing over cold surface. Right, so you get the warm air that can hold a lot of water, and the surface is very cold. So as it blows over top of it, the air starts to cool, and as the air starts to cool, it saturates and it condenses out. So you see a lot of pictures of San Francisco and the Golden Gate Bridge, and it has this fog on it. Oops, that's advection fog. Upslope fog. Now, we don't need to worry about this, and so when my husband was like, "You forgot upslope fog," I was like, "Really? They're going to ask you about that on a flying test in Florida?" And it's like, apparently. I'm like, okay, fine. So, upslope fog. Basically, the air gets pushed up the mountaintop. Well, when the air gets pushed up, it cools, it condenses, and you get clouds, right? So, fog. I did see this when we lived in Colorado. I was up on the top of Pikes Peak, and you could see the fog down below you. That was cool. Now there's evaporation fog. There's actually a couple types. Frontal and steam. Okay, steam fog, I think it's well named, right? If you look at this picture, it looks like the lake is just evaporating. Right? And that's actually what's happening. The cool air moves over warm water. It cools down that boundary of that air and that water where they meet, and when it cools that down, you reach saturation, you condense out. So you're going to see this over bodies of water. The other type of evaporation fog is called frontal fog. Sometimes people call it precipitation fog. And both of those are kind of good names, although frontal is usually the more popular name. I prefer precipitation, but frontal is the one that people usually talk about. Frontal fog. So basically, this picture is a pretty good picture where it's raining down, and just at the boundary of the rain is evaporating. As soon as it hits, it evaporates. As soon as it comes down, it evaporates. And it's saturating the part right in front of all that rain. What happens when you saturate? You condense. You get fog. I actually seen this fog at Disney. We used to, back when you would go to Epcot and we'd walk over to Hollywood Studios and we'd walk back. That was my cardio for the week. And as we were walking back, we got caught in rain, of course. And we're walking along, the rain stopped, and we're walking through this fog that's just kind of hovering around our ankles. And it kind of feels like a horror movie when I describe it like that. But this is what was going on. We were having frontal fog that we were actually walking through, which is really cool.